Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Lulu Essie podcast, where we build mental fitness, confidence, and self-love by following your own blueprint on your terms at your pace. This podcast is about personal growth that is truly yours. It's about doing the real inner work of building self-love and self-worth from the inside out. These are honest conversations about becoming who you truly are, with simple tools that meet you exactly where you are. This is unedited and always from the heart. I invite you to open your heart and your mind as we get into today's conversation. I'd like to start today by calling something out that I think a lot of people feel, but very few people say out loud. You've all heard the messages. Love yourself. You are enough. You are worthy. These messages are everywhere, on social media, in books, in podcasts, including this one. And on some level, you know all these statements are valid. Perhaps true. You know self-love matters. You know it is the foundation of so much of what we are trying to build in our lives. And yet, there are days, and maybe today is one of them, where you look at yourself, really look at yourself, and I'm not just talking about the mirror here, and you just don't like what you see. You don't like who you are. And it's not in a superficial way. It's in a deep, quiet, uncomfortable, sometimes painful way. You don't like how you reacted in that conversation. You don't like the choices you've been making. You don't like who you've been showing up as lately. You don't like where you are in your life right now. You simply do not like yourself, period. And when you are in that place, being told to love yourself does not feel like a lifeline. It feels more like one thing that you're failing at. It can feel goddamn impossible, like a pipe dream. If that sounds familiar, if you recognize yourself in any of that, I would like you to know, I want you to know that there is nothing wrong with you. You are not broken and you are not doing this wrong. You are in a very human place. And I want to wrap my arms around you with today's conversation. Because this is for you exactly where you are right now. And what I'd like to offer you today, and this is this whole episode in one sentence. You do not have to like yourself to start loving yourself. Liking yourself is a feeling, and feelings come and go. Loving yourself is something different. It's a choice. It's a direction you turn in. It's turning toward yourself one small step at a time, even when the feeling isn't there yet. So let's talk about what that actually means. There is a man whose work has stayed with me, and whose name you may know, Viktor Frankl. He was an Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor who spent years in Nazi concentration camps, including Auschwitz. And what he observed in those places is that in the most extreme suffering imaginable, the one thing that could never be taken from a person was their freedom to choose their response to their circumstances. He wrote about the space that exists between what happens to us and how we respond. And he said that our freedom lives in that space. Our dignity lives in that space. Our humanity is right there in that space. And I think about this when it comes to self-love. Because when you are in a place of truly not liking yourself, it can feel like there is no space at all. Like the feeling of self-dislike, of self-loathing, just swallows everything. It sucks the air out of everything. And like there is no room to move, no room to choose, and no room to love. But the space is there. It is always there, even if you can't feel it. That space is always there. There is a moment between the feeling of not liking yourself and what you do next. There is a breath, a choice, and in that moment, self-love does not have to look like a feeling. It can look like a decision, a tiny turn toward yourself, one honest, intentional step towards yourself. That is where self-love begins. It's the starting place. It's not in the mirror when everything feels good. It's in the quiet moment when nothing feels good and you choose to take one small step towards yourself in spite of everything. There is something else that sits right here in this space. And I think it's important because there is a lot of confusion around it. Many people, when they are trying to find their way to self-love, self-acceptance, and self-compassion, turn to affirmations. And affirmations can be truly powerful for the right person at the right moment in their journey. And I think it's important to be mindful. If you are in a place of deep self-loathing and you stand in front of the mirror and say, I love and accept myself. For some people, that lands beautifully. And for others, the gap between those words and what they actually feel is so enormous that it makes things worse, not better. It can feel like lying to yourself, like pretending, and it can feel fake. And then, when it doesn't work, the natural conclusion is, well, even this doesn't work for me. I must be really messed up. That is not a failure on your part. That is a mismatch between the tool and the timing. My whole approach on this podcast is always to adapt, not adopt. Look at the tools and the practices and the principles that are out there and ask yourself, does this fit where I am right now? Does this feel true for me at this moment in my journey? Because what works beautifully for someone else at a different point in their journey may not be what you need today. And that is not only okay, it is wisdom. If affirmations feel right for you, use them. If they bring up too much resistance right now, leave them for a while. You can always come back to them when you feel ready and when it feels natural. There is no one path here. There is only your path. I want to share a framework with you that has shaped so much of how I think about this journey. And I want to be very clear that I'm calling it a framework and not a formula, because there's a big difference. There are 3 distinct internal states on the journey to self-love. Knowing yourself, accepting yourself, and loving yourself. Knowing yourself is about being grounded. It is the moment when you see yourself clearly, without the noise of comparison, without the distortion of judgment, without the performance of who you think you should be. It's about seeing you as you actually are, your values, your patterns, your gifts, your struggles. Knowing yourself is the foundation. Knowing yourself is what makes everything else possible. When you know yourself, you are grounded. Accepting yourself is where freedom lives. It is the moment, and it can be a moment. It doesn't have to be a permanent state. It's a moment where you stop fighting what is true about you right now, where you put down the exhausting battle against yourself and you say, "This is where I am. This is real, and I'm not going to spend my energy pretending otherwise." Acceptance is the deepest form of honesty you can offer yourself. And loving yourself, that is where you truly begin to flourish, where you thrive, where you start to soar. That is where you start to act in your own interest. It's where you start to protect your own energy, to show up for yourself in the way you would show up for someone you deeply care about. To make choices that reflect the fact that you matter. Loving yourself is where the real transformation lives. This is where you are able to truly honor yourself. Now, here's something I really want you to hear. And this is the part that many frameworks can get wrong. This is not a ladder. You do not climb from knowing to accepting to loving and then stay there at the top, done, complete, fully arrived. Life does not work that way. And if you have ever felt like you had a handle on self-love and then a hard week took you right back to square one, I want you to know that that is not regression. That is just what it is to be human. You will move between these three states, sometimes within a single day. A moment of real clarity can take you straight to love. A difficult conversation, a hard time, an unexpected loss can move you back to barely accepting yourself, maybe even back to self-loathing. And sometimes you will need to go back to knowing, to return to the basics of who you actually are before you can find your way back to love. Being at peace with that movement, not judging yourself for where you land on any given day, not treating every slide back as evidence that you will never get there. That is itself one of the most profound acts of self-love there is. The journey is not the obstacle to self-love. The journey is the self-love in action, in real time. And I'd like to take a moment to focus on what is happening neurologically when you are in a place of deep self-dislike. Not to make this a science episode, it isn't, but because I think understanding this takes something that feels very personal and very shameful, and it puts it in a completely different light. When you are in a state of harsh self-criticism, your brain activates the same threat response system as it would if you were facing actual, real external danger. The same alarm goes off, the same flood of stress hormones happens, the same narrowing of perspective that happens when you need to fight or flee, happens when you are in harsh self-criticism. We've touched on this before. It's how the nervous system shows up in so many areas of our lives. And this is one of the clearest examples of it. Self-criticism is not just uncomfortable. It's physiologically a threat state. Your brain is treating you as the danger. And here is why that matters for today's conversation. You cannot love your way out of a threat state in one giant step. The nervous system doesn't work that way. When you are in that place, of self-loathing. Expecting yourself to jump straight to self-love is like asking someone who is sprinting away from danger to immediately sit down and meditate. Our biology does not allow that to happen. The pathway out is not the giant leap. It is safety, and safety is built one small step at a time. One honest moment of self-knowledge, one small act of acceptance. These are not inadequate substitutes for self-love. They are neurologically exactly how self-love becomes possible. Small steps toward yourself are not weakness or ineffective or a poor substitute. They are how this actually works. So I'd like to leave you with this. There's a particular kind of self-sabotage that lives in the personal development space. And I think it's worth talking about. And that is the belief that if you just try hard enough, commit fully enough, and want it badly enough, you can wake up tomorrow morning fully transformed and simply love yourself. And I understand the appeal of that. I understand how seductive it sounds. I really do. The idea that transformation can be total and immediate makes our head spin, and it makes our heart say, I want that and I want it now. I want to offer you something more honest, more real, and I think ultimately more powerful, and undoubtedly more sustainable. That is not how this works, and chasing that sets you up to feel like you have failed at something that was never possible in that time frame. Every time you don't wake up feeling love for yourself and you judge yourself, you add one more piece of evidence to the case against yourself. And that is the complete opposite of the place we are wanting to move towards. The goal is not to love yourself completely by tomorrow morning. The goal is one tiny step toward yourself today. That is it. That is enough. That is everything. One moment of honest self-knowledge, one breath of true acceptance, one small choice that reflects the fact that you matter. That is a step, and that step counts, and it counts way more than you think it does. And here is what I'd really like you to hear in all of this. Here is what I want you to really feel in all of this. A journey that unfolds over time gives you something that an overnight transformation never could. Every moment of self-knowledge becomes part of who you are. Every act of self-acceptance builds the ground beneath your feet. Every flicker of genuine love for yourself, even when it's small, even when it's quiet, that becomes woven into you. The journey doesn't delay your self-love. The journey is your self-love. You don't have to yourself to start. You just have to be willing to take one tiny step. And you are already listening to this. So this step counts. If this episode spoke to you, I would love for you to share it with people who need to hear it today. And if you are watching on YouTube, thank you. Please subscribe and leave a comment. It means so much to me. You can also find every episode of the Lulu Essie podcast on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you get your podcasts. What comes from the heart reaches the heart. And today, my heart is holding you in the belief that self-love is attainable for you. It's not waiting somewhere far away. It's waiting in the very next tiny step you take toward yourself. I'll see you next week.